Arguably one of New Zealand's biggest and most widely publicised murder mysteries began here, 26 years ago, in the scenic Marlborough Sounds. On the 31st of December 1997, partygoers from all over New Zealand descended upon the Marlborough Sounds to celebrate the New Year at a popular resort called Furneaux Lodge. Among the few thousand revellers were 21-year-old civil engineer apprentice Ben Smart and 17-year-old college student Olivia Hope. In the early hours of New Year's Day 1998, Ben and Olivia joined several others on a water taxi where they subsequently boarded a mystery yacht with an unknown male and were never seen again. Local Picton man Scott Watson was later identified by the New Zealand police as the unknown male, and in the following days after the disappearance of Ben and Olivia, the case went from missing persons to homicide. Although Mr. Watson was later tried and convicted of the murders, there are serious doubts about the Crown's case against him, and many flaws in the investigation surfaced, with many believing that the unknown male and mystery yacht are still out there somewhere. 26 years on, the bodies of Ben Smart and Olivia Hope have never been found, and the validity of Watson's guilty verdict remains heavily disputed.
One of New Zealand's most high-profile criminal cases, the murder of Ben Smart and Olivia Hope.
Mounting fears of something sinister. Family of a missing Blenheim couple increasingly fear the young pair has been abducted.
To start at Furneaux Lodge, where it all began on New Year's Eve.
They were last seen boarding a kETCH moored nearby.
They disappeared in the Marlborough Sounds in the early hours of New Year's Day.
Scott Watson, the owner of the sloop, seized by
Watson was
police.
found guilty beyond reasonable doubt of murdering Ben Smart and Olivia Hope.
Watson, you're sentenced to life imprisonment on both counts.
Now, certain people believe they saw Ben and Olivia on a kETCH and not Scott Watson's sloop.
I believe that they were put onto a kETCH.
Told police that she had seen Ben and Olivia here in Picton just hours after they went missing in Furneaux Lodge.
That was Olivia on that kETCH. It was Olivia. I'll guarantee it. I'll take it to my grave.
No doubt about that at all.
No doubt about it. None at all. That was definitely Olivia Hope sitting on the back of that boat on the 2nd of January.
She said they were there with two Māori men, a Māori woman and a rough-looking Caucasian man. She also said that Olivia looked very frightened and sad, and when she recognised the school friend, she said to her, "Can you help me?"
Marlborough in the late 90s was still a relatively small, quiet farming region. The small towns of Blenheim and Picton, for the longest time, had been the typical rural small town with small town problems. A place where everyone knew everyone. Safe streets, friendly faces, and a low crime rate. It was in this decade that the local wine industry began booming, and with that, brought new opportunities, jobs, and tourism to the area. Idyllic and picturesque are some of the comments that best describe Endeavour Inlet, where the popular Marlborough Sounds resort Furneaux Lodge is located. It was Furneaux Lodge that was ideally placed to host its revered New Year's Eve party, annually attracting hundreds of tourists and locals to the festivities. By 1997, the secret about the famous party got out, and the staff at Furneaux Lodge would be experiencing around 2,000 people and a New Year's Eve party that they would never forget. Two of those partygoers were young friends 21-year-old Ben Smart and 17-year-old Olivia Hope. Marlborough locals and close friends, who were best described by friends and family as young, friendly, outgoing, and ready to experience the best years of adulthood. Ben spent his secondary school years in Christchurch at Christ College, following in his father's footsteps by becoming a civil engineer, and he was planning on working at his father's firm in early of January 1998. He and Olivia shared a love of music, and both were passionate about the art form, and from that, a strong friendship was forged. It was here at Marlborough Girls' College, where 17-year-old Olivia had finished her final year of secondary school about a month prior, and was planning on attending Otago University to study law and music in the new year.
Tell us about Olivia.
In a nutshell, she's entering the best stage of her life. She's 17, worked hard, she's done well at college, very committed, You can see by what's on the screen now that that was taken at the senior prize giving. We're very proud to have a daughter like that.
She was looking forward to going to university.
Oh, yeah.
She's going to do music and law.
Law and music, a strange mix.
Yes.
There's only one other person I know,
yes,
most probably, who was a bit like that, and he practiced the music more than the law.
On the afternoon of Thursday the 30th of December, Olivia Hope leaves her parents' Grovetown Marlborough home to drive to Whatamonga Bay in Queen Charlotte Sound to join a chartered yacht, the Tamarack. The following day, Tamarack returns to Picton and picks up 3 more people. In the afternoon, Olivia, her sister Amelia, and friends water taxi from the Tamarack, now in Endeavour Inlet, to Furneaux Lodge to take part in the New Year's Eve celebrations, along with 2,000 other people. Ben Smart was staying at a batch near Punga Cove with a group of friends. He drove to Endeavour Inlet in his Mini, bringing his beloved guitar with him. The plan was to head to Furneaux Lodge on December the 31st to celebrate at the New Year's Eve party. Also arriving at Furneaux Lodge for the festivities was 26-year-old boat builder Scott Watson. Scott Watson was passionate about sailing, having grown up here in Waikawa, Picton, the gateway to the Marlborough Sounds, where the love of boats and sailing is almost unavoidable. In fact, during Scott's childhood, the Watsons even lived on a houseboat. So it was no surprise to anyone when Watson decided to build his own 26-foot sloop to live and sail on. Back at Furneaux by late afternoon, the surrounding cove had been filled up with 150 to 200 boats taking up moorings. The Tamarack had now become a party boat with many young people joining in the fun. Olivia and her sister Amelia were delighted to see mutual longtime friend Ben Smart also at the party once they reached shore. With all the moorings having been taken, Scott Watson decided to raft up his boat called Blade next to a charter yacht called the Mina Cornelia. As the night went on, the people celebrated by drinking, singing, and dancing to live music. In the bar, a few of the staff and other partygoers noticed a scruffy-looking man who was harassing young women.
Ros,
yes,
you were working on the bar that night?
I was.
Busy night.
Very busy night.
You've told the police about one particular person you noticed that night.
I did.
Tell me about this person.
He was just in the corner of Reggie's corner. And
he was in Reggie's corner?
Yep.
That in itself, I understand, is unusual.
That is unusual. Reggie sits there all the time.
Where was Reggie?
In somewhere else in the bar at the time.
But why did you notice him?
He was just a strange looking... He gave me a strange feeling, really. Didn't like him at all.
He gave you the creeps?
Yes, did.
And there was some suggestion made that there was a fellow going around hitting on women. Was that this fellow?
But there were probably several guys
Well,
that night, but he was doing that, yeah.
You've given the police an identikit picture of this fellow?
Yes, I did.
But of course he may have had nothing to do with...
That's right, he may not have done.
With the disappearance?
No.
This scruffy-looking man, as described by staff and other witnesses, was also unusual in the way that he, quote, paid for drinks with fistfuls of cash, another point to bring up later. What's important to note is that around the time those who witnessed this mystery man, Scott Watson was still in the bay partying aboard the Mina Cornelia with a group of others. Scott Watson arrives on shore at around 10 p.m. and is noted in later police eyewitness statements about his drunken behaviour and also harassing women. As midnight approached, Ben and Olivia were reunited, and as the following hours of New Year's Day approached, the party began winding down. Partygoers began leaving for their boats or their accommodations on shore. At around 3 a.m., Ben and Olivia decided to head back to the Tamarack, where Olivia had paid for berthing, only to find that all the berths were taken up by drunken freeloaders. Annoyed and frustrated, they both hail one of Furneaux's water taxis operated by staff member Guy Wallace. Aboard the water taxi are Olivia's sister Amelia, another couple, and the mysterious unkempt man from the bar earlier. Olivia collects her personal belongings and leaves with Ben on board the water taxi, while Amelia and another person board the Tamarack, despite being told there is nowhere to sleep. When questioning Wallace about available accommodation in the area, the mystery man speaks up. The mystery man says that he has a yacht that Olivia can stay on, but Ben can't. Everyone passes this off as either a drunken talk or just a harmless joke. The man directs Guy Wallace to pilot the taxi to his yacht, which was described by Wallace and others aboard as a beautiful old-style looking two-masted kETCH with blue stripe and round portholes. Ben and Olivia get onto this yacht with the mystery man, and they are never seen again.
During the course of your operations that night, you noticed a kETCH, a distinctive kETCH.
Very distinctive, yeah.
Now, in what way very distinctive?
Probably the most distinctive thing about it was all the ropes that were hanging off it.
So the kETCH you're talking about is where?
Not quite as far as that little boat you can see in the distance, but right outside all the other boats.
Ben and Olivia were reported missing a day later on the 2nd of January, when it was apparent they had not returned home after the party. Initially, police were engaged in a missing persons inquiry and began talking to witnesses at Furneaux. A number of staff and others reported seeing Ben and Olivia getting onto a two-masted 40-foot kETCH. The kETCH in question was noted for its distinguishable style and vintage look. On the 3rd of January, Guy Wallace, who becomes a key witness in the case, is interviewed by police and draws a description of the yacht he saw. By now, media had got wind of the story and everyone was looking for a 40-foot kETCH with blue stripes and round portholes. Searches begin on the 3rd of January, initially coordinated by Picton Police. Then, as concerns mounted, Blenheim Area Controller Inspector Steve Caldwell takes charge. The Air Force and Navy are asked to keep an eye out for the mystery kETCH, as well as commercial fishing vessels, boating clubs, and waterside lodges. By the 4th of January, it became apparent that the case was becoming too large for the Blenheim Police to handle on their own. They now required the additional services of resources and detectives. Police appealed to the public for any photographs or videos taken that night to help them identify and interview all the boat owners there. They are met with an enthusiastic response. The images and videos that the police receive help paint a better picture for their investigation. By this stage, police divers are also searching the Sounds. Detective Inspector Rob Pope, a top CIB investigator from Christchurch, takes charge of the operation on the 6th of January. While police do not comment on the status of the inquiry, it's well known that most major homicide investigations are headed by detective inspectors.
41-year-old Christchurch Detective Inspector Rob Pope was called in to urgently assess the case. An officer with 22 years' experience, he says he knew immediately that this was no ordinary missing persons case.
The operation was to be known as Operation Tam, short for the Tamarack, the charter on which Olivia had arrived at Furneaux Lodge. By the 10th of January, Operation Tam's staffing had risen from 29 to 44, including SAR personnel, making it one of the biggest South Island investigations for some years. Staff were brought in from Wellington, Christchurch, Auckland and Dunedin. Over the next weeks, some 23 detectives, on average, will work on the inquiry. Witnesses described to police about a sleazy man who was unkempt and harassing women. There were also several reports of the kETCH that was described earlier. While the public and the media were focused on the description of a mystery kETCH and a mystery man, Inspector Rob Pope began to set his eyes on someone else. That someone else was 26-year-old boat builder and local Picton man, Scott Watson. Within the following days, weeks, and even for months after Ben and Olivia were reported missing, the case gripped the public's imagination and swarms of media outlets flocked to the small tourist town of Picton. News got out that Guy Wallace, who worked at Furneaux, was the last to see the pair alive. Rumours began to circulate that the police were now investigating the case as a homicide, and naturally, everyone was pointing fingers at Guy Wallace. Inspector Caldwell of the initial Blenheim investigation team is moved to give the media assurance that Mr. Wallace is a star witness and not a suspect. Wallace was reported to have finished at Furneaux Lodge and to be working for his father early on in January. Later on in the investigation, Guy Wallace would state that he felt under pressure from the police to skew his statements about what he actually saw that night. He also later admitted to being harassed by police in an attempt to point the blame towards another individual who was also at the party that night. By the 12th of January, Operation Tam set its sights on a single-masted sloop called Blade. The boat is pulled from the water and searched for evidence. By the 14th of January, despite Rob Pope telling media that there was no one in custody and no suspect to name, the name of the boat's owner is blasted over the country to all outlets, and this is the day that the name Scott Watson enters the public's consciousness. Scott Watson was brought in for questioning on the same day his boat was seized. In a later interview published by North and South magazine, Watson describes his police interview as surprisingly different from those he experienced in the past. almost as if it were an interrogation. It became apparent that Scott Watson was top of Operation Tam's suspect list. Rob Pope publicly demonstrated a code of silence and would not mention Watson by name, nor would he state whether the police had a main suspect. But why were the police singling in on Watson at all? What made him so special in their investigation? Detective Inspector Rob Pope has publicly stated that Scott Watson stuck out like dog's balls. With a criminal record from his youth, and the fact that he travelled out to Furneaux Lodge alone, this enough gave Rob Pope and his team enough motive to search and seize his boat Blade, and make him the prime suspect. Watson had 48 criminal convictions at the time, mainly from when he was a teenager for burglary, theft, cannabis offences, 2 counts of possessing an offensive weapon, and 1 for assault when he was 16. Watson had been in prison for 2 short periods in 1989 and 1990, but had seemingly cleaned up his act in his 20s, having just 1 conviction in the 8 years leading up to 1998. Police made out Watson and his family to be an unsavoury bunch of criminals, and according to District Councillor Gerald Hope, Olivia's father, they even helped substantiate rumours about incest within the family. Every night on the news, across New Zealand, the name Scott Watson was being dragged through the mud. The police also obtained 70+ hours of recorded conversation by bugging Watson's parents and his sister's homes. They even regularly fed Watson's ex-girlfriend with questions to ask, hoping he would incriminate himself. So intense was their focus on Scott Watson that they dismissed earlier reports of the kETCH altogether, stating, quote, "It probably doesn't exist." From February onwards, with the help of the media, Scott Watson became New Zealand's public enemy. On the 15th of June 1998, Scott Watson was arrested and he was to stand trial over a year later in June of 1999. The police were able to arrest Watson after pressuring witnesses to point Watson out of a suspect photo montage. It should be noted that both witnesses only pointed out similarities in the photograph number 3, but still denied the person in the photo was the mystery man that night.
Was your impression then that he had longish hair?
Yes.
Right. And by that, would you say that at the time it looked like it needed a cut?
Yes. Yep.
Right. And generally, would you be happy to describe his hair as wavy and sort of shoulder length?
Yes. Yep.
The 11-week trial gained an enormous amount of media attention. This is in spite of there being hundreds of witnesses to be interviewed still. The Crown's case against Watson was that he invited Ben and Olivia onto his boat in the early hours of January 1st, 1998, killed them both and dumped their bodies somewhere in the Cook Strait. The Crown had arranged 448 witnesses to the defence's 26. In the trial, it was noted by many witnesses that Scott Watson was not aboard the same water taxi that Ben and Olivia were on. In fact, the mystery man, noted by dozens of witnesses, is described as scruffy, long hair shoulder length, unshaven face, possibly 2 to 3 days of stubble. The mystery man was also described as wearing a long-sleeved, possibly green or khaki-coloured shirt, with a red tab on the breast pocket. This photo here was taken the same night, shows a clean-shaven, short-haired Watson wearing a blue shirt partying aboard the Mina Cornelia with its occupants. What's also interesting to note is that several of the key witnesses did not point out Watson in their initial police interviews or subsequent testimonies.
Is that the montage of photographs that the police were asked you to look at?
Mm-hmm.
And which of the photographs was it that you picked out as having that feature of the hairline that you've been describing?
The first one.
Photograph 1. Just turn it around and using your finger on the photograph, just indicate what aspect of the photograph bore the similarity that you've been talking about.
The point over there.
The sort of pointy bit in the middle.
Yeah.
Guy Wallace was always adamant that Scott Watson did not at any point enter the water taxi with himself and Ben and Olivia. Despite the contradictions to the Crown's argument, they hypothesised what is now known as the two-trip theory. The Crown argued that Don Anderson, another water taxi driver, dropped Watson at the Blade sometime between 2 to 4 a.m. After this, Watson somehow returned to shore at Furneaux. Although the prosecution could not explain how this happened, they argued that it was not necessarily important, but said he must have done so because witnesses said he was involved in an altercation on shore, probably between 3 to 3:30 a.m. Then the Crown claimed that Blade left its mooring at Endeavour Inlet probably before 6 a.m. on New Year's Day with Ben and Olivia's bodies, that Watson then dumped them into the Cook Strait, sailed to Erie Bay, and lied about the time he arrived. One witness claims to have seen Watson in Erie Bay alone at about 5 p.m. However, according to a police statement from Scott's sister, Sandy Watson, they both went sailing together from the 1st of January to the 3rd. It seems like all the Crown had to go on was circumstantial evidence. It seems like they would need hard evidence, but without any bodies, that might prove difficult. The Crown now had to place their trust in the hopes that any forensic evidence would be found when Operation Tam seized and searched Watson's sloop. Forensic scientists who investigated the boat stated that at least 30% of the surface of the boat had been cleaned. The Crown argued this was done in order to dispose of any evidence of murder, while the defence argued it was purely just a daily function of life on a boat. The second point of reference found by forensics was a small roof hatch on Blade that was found to have scratch marks on it. The prosecution argued that these scratches were made by Olivia while being held captive by Watson.
The hatch cover. Hatch cover? Yeah. It was all scratched? Yeah. Yeah.
Watson claims that the scratches were made by his sister's children during the Christmas holidays. This is also corroborated by his sister Sandy Watson and the Watsons' neighbour. The last bit of evidence was the now infamous tiger blanket. The blanket was sent off to ESR Labs in Auckland to be searched and tested for any matches of DNA to Ben and Olivia. The blanket was searched and 400 dark hairs of various lengths were found. The hairs were put into 2 snaplock bags and sent away for DNA analysis. With a reference bag containing hairs taken from Olivia's bedroom, 2 searches were conducted on 2 different dates, and it was concluded that no hairs matching Olivia's description were found. However, a 3rd search was conducted at the request of the Crown, and 2 blonde hairs were found, one 15 centimetres and the other 25 centimetres in length. The hairs were analysed and found to be 28,000 times more likely to be a match to Olivia Hope. It should be noted that this isn't even the highest match used by DNA and forensic scientists. It was noted and argued by Watson's defence that the reference hairs found on Olivia could have been cross-contaminated with the hairs found on the blanket. After all, both sets of hairs were analysed on the same working bench at the same time.
Who made the cut in the bottom right-hand corner as you look at the bag, which is a cut of, I don't know, a centimetre deep or long or something? Who did that?
That looks very much like as if it's been, while it's been in its bag, because we need to cut the envelopes that the hairs are contained in.
Right.
Occasionally, it may happen that the scissors catch
Cut into the bag.
It is possible it can happen.
Right.
That's what I think has happened, but
you're not sure?
I'm not certain, no.
The defence argued that Watson could not have possibly been on the water taxi with Wallace, Smart and Hope due to the time difference, and witnesses who claim Watson was on board his boat closely hitched to their boats. On that note, no one heard Ben and Olivia get onto Blade with Watson either. The final blow to Watson's defence was the inclusion of 2 prison informants known as Witnesses A and B. The damning testimonies of the 2 prison informants were satisfactory enough for the jury and judge. Although one witness recanted their testimony a year later, Scott Watson was sentenced to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 17 years on September the 11th, 1999.
And as a result, they ended up on this kETCH.
They were last seen boarding a kETCH moored nearby.
You noticed a kETCH, a distinctive kETCH.
Very distinctive, yeah.
There is nothing to suggest the kETCH, as described by a number of witnesses, was at the Furneaux Inlet on the New Year's period.
Quite honestly, when the sloop came out, it surprised us because we were chasing a kETCH.
Now, can you remember seeing any stripe, along the side of this kETCH?
It's described as being about 12 metres or 40 feet long.
I believe that they were put onto a kETCH.
Early on in the investigation of Operation Tam, the description of the 40-foot kETCH was completely thrown out of the public conversation when Scott Watson's 26-foot sloop was seized by police. The police, Rob Pope, and even Olivia's father stated that the kETCH didn't exist. However, multiple sightings of a blue and white two-masted kETCH were seen across the Marlborough Sounds in the following days after New Year's.
You were one of the courtesy boat, one of the so-called water taxi drivers?
Yes.
So you were working out there all night?
Yep.
And you saw kETCHs?
At least 4 or 5 kETCHs here in the bay, and the police have got descriptions of those kETCHs.
So you know your boats?
I would think so.
You know there were kETCHs?
Yes.
So why don't the kETCHs pop up in the photograph the police have of the boats that night?
Well, the problem is when the photographs were taken, one lot was taken just before or early or later on in the evening.
Yeah.
And the other photograph was taken in the early hours of the morning.
Right.
And a lot of the boats had actually left.
You know Guy Wallace?
Yes.
But if Guy Wallace says he took them to a kETCH,
yep,
what do you say to that?
I believe that they were put onto a kETCH. But what happened after that is, I don't know. I didn't see what happened after that.
In 2004, 5 years after the sentencing of Scott Watson, the independent maritime research group decided to investigate the anomalies and inconsistencies of the case, specifically those regarding the mystery kETCH. What they found was astonishing. Initially, the MRG set out to disprove the existence of the kETCH, but as they pieced together eyewitness accounts in various documents, they could match the description of the boat to the one seen in Endeavour Inlet in December-January of 97-98. Through their findings, they believe that the kETCH was named Antares and was used by a drug smuggling ring, and were able to track its movements from the Pacific in late 97 to the Marlborough Sounds and the northern parts of New Zealand in early 98. This would possibly fit in with the description of the mystery man, who was described by staff at Furneaux Lodge that night as paying for drinks with fistfuls of cash. Other sightings of the kETCH were reported to Operation Tam during the first few weeks of January 98, but police were dismissive of any sightings reported to them. Sightings as far as Manukau were also dismissed, with the police telling witnesses, quote, "We're not interested in that kETCH," end quote. In Mapua, witnesses who positively sighted the kETCH, while it was docked, were told by police, quote, "You didn't see it, you are mistaken," end quote. Several positive sightings of the kETCH occurred on Saturday the 3rd of January 1998 in Mapua. One of note also reported seeing a dirty VW combi van at Mapua Wharf, and 2 scruffy-looking men were offloading barrels from the yacht into the van. The last positive sighting of the kETCH was in early February of 1998 at Great Barrier Island, and was made by a retired police officer who reported the sighting to Operation Tam in Blenheim. That report was dismissed. Why was Operation Tam so focused on Scott Watson and his yacht? And why did they dismiss multiple sightings of the mystery kETCH? Will we ever know what happened to Ben Smart and Olivia Hope? Or will the Marlborough Sounds remain forever silent? Thanks for watching. This has been a Shadow Matter exclusive episode, The Murder Mystery of Ben Smart and Olivia Hope. I would like to point out a few resources that I found extremely helpful when I was doing research for this video. One is the documentary Doubt, the Scott Watson case. The second is Maritime Research's video series about the mystery kETCH. And the third is crime.co.nz, with all the headlines and articles historically that reported on the case. I will link all of these sources in the description below. I highly recommend you go and check them out. I also implore you to do your own research. All of these opinions are my own. I've done my own research here. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and click that notifications bell to keep up to date with the latest videos. And together we can explore the strange, the terrifying, the unknown, the shadow matter.